Yo, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we have a father and son build that's about to go down. This video will be a full build guide from start to finish on how to piece together a PC. First, I'll be doing a cleaning of my client's PC because he wants to reuse some components for his son's PC. Next, I'll be going over all of the parts we will be using. I will show you how to install Windows on your computer from a USB that we will make. I'll be recommending settings to turn off with a fresh install of Windows. And lastly, I'll be showing you how to update your BIOS, video card drivers, de-bloating Windows 10, and how to overclock your GPU. First on the list is to decontaminate and dismantle everything from his old PCs. The timelapse got messed up and recorded it super zoomed in for some reason. So for both systems, we will be reusing both power supplies, hard drives, and video cards. The PC on the left was his son's, and he looked to be about 12 years old. And can you believe he's running a GTX 1080 Ti? I'm still shocked. The father's build on the right has a RTX 2070, an i7 7700, and a 240mm deep cool AIO that we will be reusing. First, we need to clean out all of the dust in this thing. It's super clogged up because he smoked cigarettes near his computer. Now if you're looking to clean a radiator, be sure not to push too hard on the fins or else you can bend them. Use a soft brush to get the gunk out easier. And to clean the brush after, we just left it in a bowl of detergent and bleach for a day. Now for parts, we will be using a Ryzen 7 3800X, a tough B550M Plus motherboard, 32 gigs of Trident Z RGB RAM by G.Skill, a 240mm AIO from Cooler Master, a RTX 2070, a 1TB SSD by Crucial, a 3TB hard drive from Western Digital, a 500GB NVMe SSD by Corsair, Arctic thermal paste, a 750W power supply from Rosewell, and an ASUS TUF Gaming GT301 case. They both got matching cases. His son gets his old i7 7700 that is mounted on a ASRock Z170A motherboard with a single 16GB stick of RAM. I forgot to switch the position for the RAM looking at this footage. And here's the infamous 1080 Ti. Okay, let's start with the motherboard and populate the CPU socket first. Place the motherboard on the box that it came in and not on the plastic bag because of static. Next, lift up the arm on the CPU socket, locate the small triangle and it should match the gold triangle on the CPU. The CPU should just fall into place and no force is required. Now if we were going to use the cooler included or an air cooler, we would install it at this step, but since we are using an AIO, we will install them later. Next up is the RAM. You don't really need the ones that say compatible with Ryzen, any RAM will work. The ones with this verification are more for machines that can't afford any downtime, such as a workstation or something along those lines. Open up the tabs and make sure the notch is lined up. Then push down with even pressure until you hear a satisfying click. I'll just mention that this was my first time populating every slot in a motherboard, and it was just as satisfying as I imagined. Next up is the NVMe SSD. Some motherboards may require you to install these standoffs and some may be pre-installed. I screw the extra ones into the second NVMe slot just to make sure they are there for when my client decides to add another one in. Don't crank the screws or any screws down on the motherboard. Snug is tight enough. Next, let's populate the SSDs and hard drives. Keep in mind there are coarse and fine thread screws and each screw has a different job, so refer to the manual if you are not sure which screw to use. Next, try to map out where all of your cables are going to run, especially if your case has a lot of RGB components because they all require additional connectors for the RGB. And it can easily turn into a rat's nest of cables. Before you install the motherboard, make sure you install the AIO shield. Next, install your motherboard and do a dry fit to see if you need additional standoffs for the screw holes in the board. Your case should come with a standoff socket, and if it doesn't, you may need a crescent wrench to tighten the standoffs. Again, do not put any random screw into the standoff. Refer to the manual to ensure you don't get a random screw stuck in the standoff. Next, let's plug one fan into the fan header and we'll worry about making it neat later. After that, we will connect the front I/O. Usually there's only one HD audio, one USB, a USB 3.0, power and reset switch, hard drive LED, and a power LED. These only go in one way, so refer to your motherboard manual if you are unsure where these are located. The power and reset are the worst to plug in. A tip is to plug them in with the motherboard outside of the case, that way it's easier to see and access those pins. Now if your budget allows you to get a modular or semi-modular power supply, do it. It's well worth the extra dollars. Now when I install the power supply, I like to look at which connectors I won't need and bundle them up so they are out of my way. Next, let's grab the CPU 8 pin that goes in the top left of the motherboard, a 24 pin power that usually goes near the middle right, a SATA power for the storage devices, and the PCIe power for the video card. Usually that will be all the power connectors you will need unless you have older style fans that require Molex power or RGB components that require additional power. Next we will install our AIOs. If you are using the same setup as the system on the right, you might have some clearance issues mounting it to the top if you have a large VRM heatsink on the motherboard. After playing with positioning for so long, I do not want to install another AIO for a long time, especially one with RGB because of all the extra cables. And with the power of editing, this only took 1 minute to install. Alright, let's install Windows 10. First, you will need a bootable USB drive. If you already have one, feel free to skip this step. If you need to create one, you will need an empty USB drive with a minimum of 8 gigs. If you have files on there already, take them off because the utility formats the drive. Once you create a bootable USB drive, you can put your files back on there. To do this, Google Windows 10 ISO download. Download and open their tool. You'll want to choose Create Installation Media. USB flash drive. And now just wait until it's complete. Now that we have our flash drive, we can plug it into the PC and turn it on. And spam the delete key to get into the BIOS. The first thing I change with every new build is the RAM speed to whatever it says on the box. In our case, it's 3200 MHz. Next, take a picture of the current motherboard version that's installed. We'll need this for later. Save and restart. Next up is the spam the button for the boot menu. If you don't see the option, head back into the BIOS and in the boot area, change the boot priority to the USB flash drive that you just created. And with my luck, my USB just died. Installing Windows is similar on most computers. I'll demonstrate on one of my client's laptops that needs a new drive. Now here we are about a week later and the father and son's computers were delivered back to them. And my client knew how to install Windows on his own. Now I wasn't able to run the full test suite that I normally do, but my client was able to run Cinebench R15 for me. More on that later. Installation is pretty straightforward and don't connect to the internet yet. We will finish this, then tweak a few settings, then connect to the internet. And decline and turn off all the features that they ask you in this setup. Alright, the first thing to do is, if you are using an SSD, turn off disk defragment for that disk. Next, head over to General Settings and turn off all of these. You can basically turn off everything besides microphone and camera if you plan on using them. Next, right-click on your taskbar and go into Settings. I like to use small taskbar buttons. Never combine taskbar buttons. And turn off Show Contacts on taskbar. In colors, I choose dark. Nothing against light, but this is much easier on the eyes late at night. Next, head over to Mouse. Additional mouse options. And in Pointer options, deselect Enhance Pointer Position. For most people, acceleration isn't ideal for games. Next, go to Power and Sleep Settings, Advanced Settings, and choose High Performance. Next, this is more of a personal preference, but I like to turn off animations for Windows. It makes it seem more snappy. Now we can connect to the internet and check for Windows updates. Windows will automatically install a video card driver once we connect to the internet, but we will need to install the latest version.
Eternity later.
Now to get rid of bloatware, I use a tool called Windows 10 Debloater, which runs a script to remove all the trash that comes with Windows 10. The link is down in the description and all you need to do is download it, unzip it to anywhere, and then run as administrator. It'll remove everything on this list. Type in GeForce driver download into Google. Select the one that you need and hit search. Scroll down and download GeForce Game Ready driver. Once that's done, open it up and don't download GeForce Experience. Do a custom installation. Next, we will download the drivers for our motherboard. To do that, head over to your motherboard's website, and in the support section, download all of the latest drivers. Now open up the picture that you took of the BIOS version earlier and compare it to the latest one on this list. Now if you need to update, you'll need to download the file and extract it to a USB drive. Restart your computer, and inside the BIOS there will be something along the lines of Easy BIOS Flash or BIOS Flash, and go through the steps. Now once that is done, we will download MSI Afterburner to overclock our GPU. Or if you're not comfortable with that, this is a great tool to keep an eye on temperatures and to tune your fan curve. Now you might not need MSI Afterburner exactly. You can download your video card manufacturer's software if it has RGB lights and control it from there. Now for overclocking, I like to use Unigine Heaven to get a general feel on the overclock that we can achieve with the GPU. Some games may require you to dial back the clocks just a bit to run smoothly. To overclock, simply download Unigine Heaven and install it and open it alongside with MSI Afterburner or any GPU software. Set the preset to extreme and run it for a few minutes to get the temperatures up. Next, max out the power slider limit and temperature limit. Now let's start on a core clock with plus 25 increments until it crashes or becomes unstable, then we'll dial back 15. Repeat that with a memory clock until it is stable. Here are my results with my 2070 Super, yours may vary. Now if you're happy with your results, right click on one of these numbers down here and select the startup button to apply these settings as startup. Do this only if you have a stable overclock, or else your computer may boot into a continuous unstable loop. And just like that, you overclocked your GPU. It's just that simple. Now to overclock your CPU, I won't cover that in this video, but you will need to do that in your BIOS. And you change the core multiplier value and run a CPU stress test like Cinebench R15 until it's not stable, then dial it back. My client's CPU scored 2146 on Cinebench R15, the highest score that I have ever tested. And his son's i7 7700 scored a whopping 862. And that concludes this PC build guide. Thank you all so much for making it this far in the video. Please consider subscribing and let me know if you enjoyed this style of video in the comments. And I'll see you all in the next one.